Hello. Welcome to an overview of Bulletin 137, Louisiana's Early Learning Center Licensing Regulations, Lecture 3, Chapter 18. My name is Rachel Dixon, and I am a Field Operations Senior Manager with the Division of Licensing, and I will be presenting this lecture to you. Introduction to Course 3. The objective of this course is to provide an overview of the regulations found in Chapter 18 of Bulletin 137. Questions related to the Early Learning Center regulations can be directed to your licensing consultant or an email to ldelicensing@la.gov, or you can call 225-342-9905. Chapter 18, Childcare Criminal Background Checks, also known as CCCBC. Quiz. To help you dig deeper into the licensing regulations, there will be a quiz at the end of this chapter. Chapter 18, Childcare Criminal Background Checks, CCCBC. Section 1801, Prohibition. No person who has been found by the Department to be ineligible for child care purposes shall own, operate, or participate in the governance of an early learning center, or shall be employed by an early learning center as a volunteer, staff member, employee, or independent contractor of any kind, or shall be employed by an entity identified in Section 1809 as an employee or contract employee that provides services in early learning centers when children are present. Section 1803, Determination of Eligibility. The Department shall determine a person's eligibility for child care purposes based upon the results of the person's CCCBC. Components of a CCCBC. A CCCBC shall include a request for a fingerprint-based search of the Louisiana Criminal History Information Record, a request for a fingerprint-based search of the Federal Criminal History Information Record, a request to DCFS to search the Louisiana State Central Registry of Child Abuse and Neglect, a search of the Louisiana Sex Offender and Child Predator Registry, a search of the National Sex Offender Registry as required by 45 CFR 98.43 Section B2, and a request for a search of the name-based State Criminal History Information Record, State Sex Offender Registry, and State Registry for Child Abuse and Neglect in each state where the person resided in the past 5 years, as required by 45 CFR 98.43.43, Section B3. Section 1803, Determination of Eligibility. The Department shall determine that a person is either eligible or ineligible for child care purposes. The Department shall provide written notice of a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes in the following manner. To the requesting early learning center or entity identified in Section 1809, the determination that the person is eligible or ineligible for child care purposes only, without revealing any disqualifying crime or other related information regarding the person. To the person for whom the Early Learning Center or entity identified in Section 1809 requested the determination that the person is eligible or ineligible for child care purposes, and if the person is ineligible for child care purposes, information related to each disqualifying crime or other related information regarding the person, and information about the opportunity to appeal the accuracy or completeness of the CCTVC results received by the department and used in the determination of eligibility. Section 1805, persons ineligible for child care purposes. A person shall be ineligible for child care purposes if the person refuses to consent to a CCTVC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes, knowingly makes a materially false or incomplete statement in connection with the CCTVC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes, has been convicted or pled guilty or nolo contendere to any of the crimes listed in RS 15-587.1C, or those of a jurisdiction other than Louisiana, which would constitute a crime under the provision cited in RS 15-587.1C, or is registered or required to be registered on the Louisiana Sex Offender and Child Predator Registry, any other state sex offender registry, or the National Sex Offender Registry. A person shall also be ineligible for child care purposes if, upon the department's written request to DCFS after March 1st, 2018, for information as to whether a person's name is on the state central registry with DCFS. The department receives written notice from DCFS that the person's name is recorded on the state central registry as a predator for a justified finding of child abuse or neglect. Until the required written notification is received from DCFS indicating that a person's name is recorded on the state central registry as a predator for a justified finding of child abuse or neglect, the department shall not withhold a determination that a person is eligible for child care purposes unless the results of some other component of the CCTVC require a determination of ineligibility. A person may also be ineligible for child care purposes if, upon the department's request for information from another state, the department receives from the state written notice that the person's name is recorded on that state central registry or repository of child abuse and neglect as having a finding of child abuse or neglect, or written notice that the person is ineligible for child care purposes. In addition, for Type 3 centers, as an owner, director, or director designee shall not have been convicted of or pled guilty or no contender to a felony within the past 10 years for any of the following crimes of fraud. Section 1807, CCTVC, based determinations of eligibility for child care purposes required for owners, volunteers, staff, visitors, and contractors of early learning centers. Owners. An early learning center shall obtain a CCTVC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for each owner prior to submitting an initial application for licensure, and shall provide documentation of said determination for each owner with an initial application for licensure. The center shall have documentation of said determinations available at all times for inspection upon request by the department. New members or owners. An early learning center shall obtain a CCTVC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for new members or owners that are to be added to a partnership, church, corporation, limited liability company, or governmental entity, even if such change does not constitute a change in ownership for licensing purposes, in the same manner as for original owners and members. Affidavit. If a person owns less than a 25% share in the ownership or management of an early learning center and does not meet one or more of the criteria listed in Section 503.A.5.B, said person may submit a signed, notarized affidavit to the center in lieu of providing a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility. The affidavit shall certify that the person has less than a 25% share in the ownership or management of the center and does not meet any of the criteria listed in Section 503.A.5.b. Volunteers and staff. An early learning center shall obtain a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for each volunteer, staff member, or employee of any kind, and shall have documentation of said determination available at all times for inspection upon request by the department. Visitors and contractors. An early learning center shall obtain a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for each visitor or independent contractor of any kind, and shall have documentation of said determination available at all times for inspection upon request by the department, unless the visitor or independent contractor, other than a therapeutic professional as defined in Section 103 of this part, will be accompanied at all times while at the center when children are present by an adult staff member who is not being counted in child-to-staff ratio. The center shall have documentation of said determination of eligibility or documentation of accompanying staff member available at all times for inspection upon request by the department. Documentation of the adult staff member not otherwise counted in child-to-staff ratios who accompanied a visitor or independent contractor shall include the date, arrival, and departure time of the visitor or contractor, language stating that the visitor or contractor was accompanied by a staff member at all times while at the center when children were present, and the signature of both the contractor and the accompanying staff member. Parents or legal custodians, grandparents, siblings. Parents or legal custodians of an enrolled child or other persons authorized in writing by parents to pick up their child who are only bringing a child to or picking up a child from an early learning center are not required to have a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes. Parents or legal custodians, grandparents, siblings, and other relatives of an enrolled child who are attending a function at the center where center staff will be present and supervising all children are not required to have a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes. Court-appointed special advocate. A court-appointed special advocate, also known as a CASA volunteer, shall submit to an early learning center his or her CASA volunteer order of assignment that is signed by a juvenile court judge and the CASA volunteer, and it shall be accepted by the center as documentation of eligibility for child care purposes for the CASA volunteer pursuant to Louisiana Children's Code Article 424.1, Section D. Section 1809, CCCBC, Determinations of Eligibility for Child Care Purposes required for persons providing services in early learning centers. The following entities shall obtain a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for any of their employees or contract employees that provide services in early learning centers when children are present. Local educational agencies that provide services to children in early learning centers for their school or contract employees who provide services in early learning centers. Resource and referral agencies that are approved by BESI and under contract with the department to provide services to early learning center employees or their employees and contract employees that provide services in early learning centers. Entities approved by BESI and under contract with the department to provide state mental health consultations in early learning centers for their employees and contract employees providing services in early learning centers. Teacher preparation programs approved by Bessie for their employees, contract employees, and enrolled students that are required to be present in early learning centers. Accredited Louisiana universities for therapeutic program faculty and enrolled students that are required to be in early learning centers. Lead agencies approved by Bessie and under contract with the department to provide services in early learning centers for their employees and contract employees providing these services in early learning centers. Louisiana Department of Health, which provides IDEA Part C services for children in early learning centers for its employees and contract employees providing services in early learning centers. Third-party contractors approved by Bessie and under contract with the department to provide services in early learning centers for their employees and contract employees providing these services in early learning centers. Entities approved by the department that provide services in early learning centers for owners and employees of the entity providing services in early learning centers. The department which provides services in early learning centers for its employees and contract employees providing services in early learning centers. Each entity shall have documentation for each required person in subsection A that allows an early learning center to verify the person's CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes. Persons approved by the department who provide services in or require access to early learning centers shall obtain a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department. Section 1811, request for CCCBC-based determinations for child care purposes from the department. An early learning center or an entity identified in Section 1809 shall request and obtain from the department a new CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes for each required person. Prior to the person being present or performing services at the center when children are present, and not less than once during a 5-year period. An early learning center or an entity identified in Section 1809 shall not be required to request or obtain from the department a new CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes for a required person, and instead shall be able to request and obtain from the department the person's CCCBC-based determination of eligibility provided to another in-state child care provider or entity identified in Section 1809 if a child care provider within the state or an entity requested and obtained a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for the person within the past 5 years, while the person was seeking employment or employed by an in-state child care provider or seeking to provide or providing services at an early learning center in Louisiana for an entity. The department provided to the initial requesting child care provider or entity a CCCBC-based determination indicating the person was eligible for child care purposes, and the person is still employed by a child care provider within the state or is still providing services in an early learning center within the state or an entity, or has been separated from a child care provider within the state or an entity for less than 180 consecutive days. Electronic fingerprints shall be used in parishes where they are available. Provisional employment for staff members of early learning centers. A center may provisionally employ as a staff member a person for whom it has requested a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes and for whom the department has received a satisfactory single-based Louisiana federal criminal history information record pending the department's receipt of the other CCCBC results and determination of the department's eligibility for child care purposes. A provisionally employed staff member may be counted in child-to-staff ratios, but must also be monitored at all times in accordance with the following. A monitor of a provisionally employed staff member must be an adult from whom the center has a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes, or prior to October 1st, 2018, a satisfactory CBC, who is designated by the center to monitor a specifically provisionally employed staff member. The center must also designate a monitor for each provisionally employed staff member present at the center. The monitor shall be physically present at the center at all times when the provisionally employed staff member is present at the center. A provisionally employed staff member may be counted in child-to-staff ratios, but must also be monitored at all times in accordance with the following. Monitors must remain within close enough physical proximity of their designated provisionally employed staff members to be able to intervene at any time if intervention is needed. Monitors shall perform at least one visual observation of each designated provisionally employed staff member every 30 minutes. The center may designate one monitor for up to a maximum of 5 provisionally employed staff members at any given time. At least one monitor must be physically present at all times in any room during nap time if a provisionally employed staff member is present. The center shall have a log or other written documentation of the monitoring of provisionally employed staff members that identifies each provisionally employed staff member, the designated monitor for each, and the times of the visual observation. Section 1817, reporting requirements. An early learning center or an entity identified in Section 1809 shall provide written notice to the licensing division within 24 hours of receipt of notice of, or upon becoming aware of, any of the occurrences listed in subsection A for an owner, volunteer, staff member, employee, or independent contractor of the Early Learning Center, or an employee or contract employee of an entity identified in Section 1809 that provides services in early learning centers when children are present. Final conviction or a plea of nolle contendere to any of the crimes listed in RS 15-587.1C, or those of a jurisdiction other than Louisiana, which would constitute a crime under the provisions cited in RS 15-587.1C. Becoming a registered or required to register on the Louisiana Sex Offender or Child Predator Registry or any other state sex offender registry or the National Sex Offender Registry, or having name recorded on the Louisiana State Central Registry of Child Abuse and Neglect or any other state central registry of child abuse and neglect. Section 1819, termination of employment and removal from center and premises. Early Learning Center. Upon receipt of notice from the department that a person is ineligible for child care purposes, or an employee, volunteer, staff member, or independent contractor of an early learning center, the center shall immediately remove the person from the center and center's premises. And if the person is employed by the center, terminate the employment of the person. Owner of early learning centers. Upon receipt of notice from the department that he or she is ineligible for child care purposes, the owner of the center shall immediately leave the center and premises and shall not return to the center or premises at any time when children are present, and shall divest of ownership of the center or close the center within 30 calendar days of receipt of said notice. entity identified, Section 1809. Upon receipt from the department that a person is ineligible for child care purposes for an employee or contract employee of an entity identified in Section 1809 that provides services in any early learning centers when children are present, the entity shall immediately notify any early learning center at which the employee or contract employee is providing services and shall prohibit the employee from providing future services on the entity's behalf in early learning centers. Section 1821, appeal of accuracy or completeness of CCCBC results. A person who has received a notice of ineligibility, also known as NOI, for child care purposes from the department may appeal the accuracy or completeness of the CCCBC results received and used by the department to determine a person's ineligibility. A person appealing the accuracy or completeness of the CCCBC results shall remain ineligible during the appeals process. Request for appeal of accuracy or completeness of CCCBC results. A request of such an appeal must be submitted in writing to the department in a form provided by the department within 45 calendar days of the date of issuance of the NOI. To be sufficient, a request for appeal must contain written reasons that identify the specific information provided in the NOI that is believed to be inaccurate or incomplete, and should include official information and or documentation of the accurate or complete information available, if available. Upon receipt of a request for appeal, the department shall determine whether the request is sufficient or insufficient and shall notify the requestor in writing accordingly. Review of appeal. If the request for an appeal is sufficient and no further information or documentation is required, the department shall complete the review of the appeal information and or documentation and render a final written decision within 30 calendar days of receipt of the request for appeal. If the request for appeal is sufficient, but additional information and or documentation is required to complete the appeal, the department shall notify the requestor in writing, and the requestor shall have 45 calendar days from the date of the request to provide the information and or documentation. If the required information and or documentation is not received within 45 days, the appeal may be denied for insufficiency of information and or documentation. If the requested information and or documentation is received within 45 days, the department shall complete the review of the appeal information and or documentation and render a final written decision within 30 days of receipt of the required information and or documentation, or receipt of required information and or documentation requested by the department on behalf of the requestor. Result of appeal. If, as a result of the appeal process, the requestor's CCCBC results are reviewed and based on revised CCCBC results, the department determines the requestor is eligible for child care purposes, the department shall notify the appeal requestor and the original requesting early learning center or entity identified in Section 1809 that the requestor is eligible for child care purposes by sending a notice of eligibility for child care purposes to both. The notice of eligibility shall be valid from the date of issuance. The expiration date shall be 5 years from the date of the original NOI was sent to the requestor and the requested early learning center or entity identified in Section 1809. If the appeals process does not result in a revision of the CCCBC results, or if it results in a revision to the CCCBC results, but based on the revised results, the requestor is still ineligible for child care purposes, the department shall notify the requestor in writing that the appeal is denied and that the determination of ineligibility remains in effect. Quiz. Choose the correct answer. Number 1, an early learning center shall obtain a CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes from the department for each blank submitting an initial application for licensure and shall provide documentation of said determination for each owner with an initial application for licensure. A, after. B, 2 months late after. C, 1 week after. D, prior to. D, prior to. True or false? Number 2, an early learning center or an entity identified in Section 1809 shall request and obtain from the department a new CCCBC-based determination of eligibility for child care purposes for each required person. True. Fill in the blank. Number 3, a monitor shall perform at least one visual observation for each designated provisionally employed staff member every blank minute. 30. Choose the correct answer. Number 4, upon receipt of notice from the department that a person on the premises is ineligible for child care purposes for an employee, volunteer, staff member, or independent contractor of an early learning center, the center shall immediately blank. A, tell everybody in the center. B, call their mom. C, remove the person from the center and terminate the employment. D, call licensing and ask why. C, remove the person from the center and terminate the employment. Choose the correct answer. Number 5, CCCBC-based determinations of eligibility are good for blank years. A, 5, B, 2, C, 1, D, 3. 5. Division of Licensing Contact Information. Louisiana Department of Education, Division of Licensing, Post Office Box 4249, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70821. Phone number is 225-342-9905. Fax number is 225-342-2498. And email address is ldelicensing@la.gov. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to write in or call, as well as fax or email to the Division of Licensing. Thank you.